The events take place in 1963. Enes Del Mar gets off a truck and waits for his employer. Soon his future colleague Jack Twist joins him. Joe Aguirre explains that they will be herding sheep on Brokeback Mountain. After coming out of the shack, the guys introduce themselves and later share a beer together. Jack tells that he has been here for the second year in a row. Enes arrived for the same reason: he desperately needs the money. Hard-working days on Brokeback Mountain begin. The guys herded the flock, set up camp, cooked food, got to know each other better, and shared plans for the future. One day in the woods, Enes encounters a bear, and the frightened horse throws him off. He barely escapes and returns after dark. In camp, Jack helps him tend to his wounds. Since the horses have lost luggage, the next day the guys hunt for game and shoot a deer. The days went by at a steady pace. Jack often talks about his love for rodeos. Enes doesn't understand this passion since it involves great risks to one's health and even life. If at first Enes seemed very taciturn, he gradually began to open up. One night, the guys get heavily drunk, and neither of them is fit to watch over the sheep. Enes stays by the fire, while Jack goes into the tent. However, during the night, the fire dies down, and it becomes very cold. Jack suggests that Enes should come inside the tent, or else he might get sick. Enes agrees and joins him. At some point, Jack unexpectedly shows romantic interest in his friend. Enes is initially stunned but eventually succumbs to the passion and even takes an active role. The next morning, Enes realizes with horror what has happened. He prepares to go to the flock, uncertain about how to behave now. In the evening, they inevitably have to talk about what transpired between them. Enes suggests to pretend as if nothing happened, as he is not like that at all. However, that same night, Enes himself goes to Jack's tent, and the events repeat. The next day, the guys fool around with each other, unaware that Joe Aguirre is watching them through binoculars. Later, Joe rides into the camp and delivers a message from Jack's mother. It turns out that his uncle has pneumonia, and probably didn't have long to live. A storm ensues, causing the flocks of Joe and another farmer to mix together. They have to separate one group of sheep from the other. The good news was that Jack's uncle had recovered. The bad news was that Joe asked to bring in all the sheep, even though it was only mid-August. This meant that the workers would not receive the promised amount in full. As it was time to leave, the guys started fooling around again, which escalated into a serious fight. Joe was extremely displeased since many of the sheep did not belong to him. It's time to say goodbye. Jack asked if they would see each other again in a year. Enes doubted it, as he planned to get married and settle down somewhere. Both of them hoped that their paths would cross again. As Jack drove away, he looked in the rearview mirror. And Enes stepped aside, and unable to stand it, burst into tears. In the next scene, we see Enes getting married to his lover, Alma. Soon Enes found a steady job. On weekends, he and his wife enjoyed going to the open-air cinema. They were about to have a baby. The next year, Jack came back to Joe Aguirre, hoping for work on the pasture. But Joe made it clear to Jack that there was nothing for him. When Jack asked his former employer if Enes had ever shown up here, Joe couldn't stand it and disdainfully said he knew about their affair. Alma and Enes were leading a typical family life. Alma had no time for anything, both daughters were always capricious, and they barely had enough money for the essentials. Before going to bed, Alma told her husband that she was tired of the ranch and wanted to live in the city. She had already found a place where they could afford the rent. Jack meanwhile is having fun at the rodeo and then drinking at the bar. In one of the races, Lorene Newsom participated, which was quite rare for a woman. And then it was Jack's turn. He had to tame a bull. The audience was satisfied with his performance. In the evening at the bar, Jack couldn't take his eyes off Lorene. The bartender mentioned that her father was a very wealthy man. The girl approached the cowboy herself, they had a good time together, and then they indulged in passion in the car. Alma got a job at a store. Enes came to see her because his boss urgently called him to the ranch. The problem was that they had no one to leave the children with. One of the girls knocked over the cans, but Alma's boss, Monroe, assured that everything was all right. Lorene and Jack had a son named Bobby. Jack's relationship with his father-in-law was strained. At home, Alma told her husband that he received a postcard from someone named Jack. It said that he would soon be passing through here. Without hesitation, Enes sent a response by mail. He was very nervous before the meeting. Soon Jack arrived, and Enes eagerly rushed to greet him. They couldn't contain themselves and started kissing right on the street. When Alma saw this, she was so shocked that she didn't even intervene. Enes introduced his best friend to the wife, and she could barely hold back her tears. The guys quickly left and booked a motel room. Alma couldn't believe what was happening. When Enes came home, he immediately announced that he and Jack were going to the mountains for a couple of days to go fishing. On Brokeback Mountain, the guys fooled around like old times. It was their only opportunity to briefly forget about everything and be alone together. They wished it could be like that forever, but it was just empty dreams. Ennis remembered how they had two farmers in love living together in their town, and they were mocked by all the residents. In the end, one of them was brutally deprived of life, and it was the work of Ennis' father. Therefore, they had no choice but to date occasionally and in secret from everyone. At Alma and Ennis's home, the quarrels never ceased. In Texas, Lorene had to endure the father's constant criticism of her husband. Jack, who worked as a salesman at his father-in-law's technology firm, planned to visit Ennis again. Once again, when letting her husband go fishing, Alma looked desperate. Their family life was falling apart, they didn't have enough money. Ennis and Jack met again on Brokeback Mountain. During their separation, each of them immersed themselves in their familiar routines. Ennis and Alma argued more often, and they no longer lived as husband and soon the couple decided to get a divorce. When Jack learned about it, he rushed over. Ennis introduced him to his daughters. Unfortunately, Ennis would have to spend the weekend with the children, since they rarely saw each other. The guys agreed to meet again in a month. On the way back, Jack cried. He couldn't accept the injustice of life. On a visit to an entertainment establishment in Mexico, Jack, desperate for desperation, stole some guy with him. On Thanksgiving, as is often the case, he got into a conflict with his father-in-law. Jack had grown tired of enduring such treatment, and for the first time, he showed who was in charge in his own house. Ennis celebrated Thanksgiving with his daughters, Alma, and her new husband Monroe. When Ennis was alone with his ex-wife, she hinted that she knew about his affair with Jack. Ennis reacted aggressively, fearing the exposure. The time for another meeting on Brokeback Mountain arrived. Jack still held on to the hope that they could be together, but Ennis considered it foolishness. As a result, the guys had an argument. At night in a bar, Ennis met a waitress named Casey, while Jack and his wife spent time with the married couple they knew. After the party, Jack smoked and chatted with the man who invited him to go fishing together. Ennis and his new girlfriend Casey visited his eldest daughter, Alma. After spending time together, on the way back, Alma complained to her father that since the birth of the baby, her mother and Monroe constantly took out their irritability on her. Ennis and Jack were vacationing together again. Lorene helped her father manage his business without paying attention to her husband. Jack confessed to Ennis that sometimes he missed him so much that he couldn't bear it. Before saying goodbye, Ennis informed Jack that he wouldn't be able to meet him until November. This news deeply upset Jack. He wondered why they only met in the cold and why Ennis was avoiding closer relationships lately. When Jack mentioned Mexico, Ennis threatened him that if he found out about any infidelity, it would end badly for Jack. Jack became furious at such an accusation because he had long been offering Ennis to live together. 2 meetings per year were not enough for him. Ennis couldn't hold back his tears, and Jack embraced him. They couldn't live like this anymore. Casey found Ennis in the cafe and tearfully asked where he had been. Ennis had nothing to say. He wanted to end this relationship because he believed Casey deserved better. One day Ennis received a distressing letter and called Lorene. She was forced to deliver the horrible news. Jack was pumping up a tire, and it burst. The rim flew right into his face. He passed away at the age of 39. Ennis couldn't say anything immediately due to shock. Jack was cremated, although he wished to be buried on Brokeback Mountain. However, none of his relatives knew where it was located. According to the widow, Jack often reminisced about Brokeback Mountain, the only place where he was truly happy. Ennis visited Jack's parents. He wanted to take his ashes to Brokeback Mountain. Jack's mother suggested that Ennis take a look at Jack's room, where everything remained as it was before. Ennis stayed there for a while and found the same shirts they wore during their first year on Brokeback Mountain. Ennis took Jack's shirt, but the parents insisted that the ashes remain at home. Ennis moved out, deciding to start a new life. His daughter Alma visited him and confessed that she and her boyfriend had decided to get married. The girl invited her father to the wedding. It wasn't easy for Ennis to gather the courage to see everyone else, but he agreed because if he didn't spend time with his loved ones now, it might be too late. Ennis still keeps his and Jack's shirts. He will never forget him. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any thrilling new products. The authors would also appreciate it if you share your thoughts in the comments section.